All India Radio presents Morning News. Good morning. I am Naresh Mago and with me is Sarabjit Kaur. The headlines. Over 56% polling recorded in 6th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Second and final phase of assembly elections in Manipur to be held tomorrow. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Quad must remain focused on promoting peace, stability and prosperity in Indo-Pacific region. Also stresses on need for dialogue and diplomacy amid Russia-Ukraine conflict. Prime Minister interacts with students who have returned from Ukraine. Defense Ministry issues advisory for Indian nationals stranded in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Survival guidelines warn them of possible aerial raids, missile and grenade attacks. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address webinar on energy for sustainable growth today. 97% of adult population in the country inoculated with first dose of COVID vaccine. And in cricket, first test match between India and Sri Lanka to begin today in Mohali. With the new Omicron variant of coronavirus causing concern, we appeal to our listeners to be vigilant and get fully vaccinated and also help others, including children between 15 and 18 years, get vaccinated. Please continue to follow these 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask. Maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. More than 56% polling has been recorded in the 6th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Voting was held for 57 constituencies spread over 10 districts in this phase yesterday. These districts are Balia, Balrampur, Siddharth Nagar, Basti, Sant Kabir Nagar, Ambedkar Nagar, Maharajganj, Kushinagar, Gorakhpur and Devariya. A total of 676 candidates, including 66 women, were in the fray. Campaign in Uttar Pradesh has reached its final stage for the assembly elections in the state. Tomorrow will be the last day for campaigning for the 7th phase, and top leaders and star campaigners of all political parties are focusing on Varanasi and adjoining districts, which are going to poll in the last phase on March the 7th. Senior BJP leader and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will camp in Varanasi for 2 days and take part in different poll programs, including a roadshow. A report.
The countdown to the poll campaign for 7th and final phase of elections in Uttar Pradesh has begun. All eyes are on Varanasi, where the stalwarts of major political parties are reaching today to garner the support of public. The roadshow of senior BJP leader and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will start from Maldahiya area of Varanasi district this afternoon, where Prime Minister will first pay tributes to Sardar Patel. The 3.5 kilometers long roadshow will pass through Lahurabir, Kabir Chaura, Maidagin and Chowk area and will culminate near Kashi Vishwanath temple, and then Prime Minister will perform puja at the temple. Later in the evening, Prime Minister will pay tributes to Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya at BHU Gate, Lanka. Prime Minister is also scheduled to address political rallies tomorrow. Samajwadi Party President Akhilesh Yadav will also lead a roadshow in Varanasi today evening. The roadshow will start at 8 p.m. and culminate at 10 p.m. Congress General Secretary Priyanka Gandhi Vadra will also campaign for party candidate Ajay Rai in Varanasi today. Sushil Chandra Tiwari, AIR News, Varanasi.
Senior BJP leader and Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address a public meeting in Mirzapur today. He is also scheduled to hold a roadshow in his parliamentary constituency, Varanasi. Senior BJP leader and Home Minister Amit Shah will address public meetings at Jakhnia, Jangipur and Saidpur in Ghazipur, Uttar Pradesh today. Senior BJP leader and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh will address public meetings in Jaunpur and Chandauli today.
In Manipur, the second and final phase of assembly elections will be held tomorrow. 22 assembly seats spread over 10 districts will go to polls in this phase. 92 candidates, including 2 women, are in the fray. Campaigning for this phase ended yesterday evening. More details from our correspondent.
In the second phase poll in Manipur, polling will be held at 1,247 polling stations spread across 3 valley and 7 hill districts. Tight security measures have been placed for the second phase poll in Manipur. Polling officials and security personnel detailed for interior areas have already been left district headquarters along with EVM and VVPAT machines. The dispersion of polling officials will be completed by this evening. On the polling day, webcasting will be done where internet facility are available and videography will be done in shadow areas. Model polling stations and pink polling station will be there in every assembly constituency. Voter assistant booth will also be there and all the polling stations will be sanitized before the polling considering the COVID-19 pandemic. JJ Thoksom, AIR News, Imphal.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in a virtual summit of Quad leaders along with US President Joe Biden, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Developments in Ukraine were discussed at the meeting, including its humanitarian implications. Mr. Modi emphasized the need to return to a path of dialogue and diplomacy. The Prime Minister underlined that the Quad must remain focused on its core objective of promoting peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Mr. Modi called for concrete and practical forms of cooperation within the Quad in areas like humanitarian and disaster relief, debt sustainability, supply chains, clean energy, connectivity and capacity building. The Prime Minister reiterated the importance of adhering to the UN Charter, international law and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. The meeting reviewed the progress on Quad initiatives since the September 2021 Quad Summit. The leaders agreed on accelerating cooperation with an objective to achieve concrete outcomes by the summit in Japan later this year. The leaders agreed to stay in touch and to work towards an ambitious agenda for the forthcoming Leaders' Summit in Japan.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with the students who returned from the conflict-hit Ukraine in his parliamentary constituency Varanasi yesterday. Students shared their experiences with the Prime Minister.
मैं कल्पना कर सकता हूं कि किस प्रकार की मानसिक परिस्थिति से आपको गुजरना पड़ा होगा। कठिनाइयों के बीच भी हम ठीक से अभी इवैक्यूएशन कर पा रहे हैं।
हम लोग तो उम्मीद भी छोड़ दिए थे कि वापस इंडिया जा पाएंगे क्योंकि 2 मार्च की हम लोग की फ्लाइट थी जो कि कैंसिल हो गई थी। जब इंडियन एम्बेसी और गवर्नमेंट वर्क किए तो हम लोग को एक नया उम्मीद मिला कि वापस इंडिया जा पाएंगे। ऑल थैंक्स टू इंडियन गवर्नमेंट। आई डोंट थिंक कि विदाउट इंडियन गवर्नमेंट हेल्प हम इंडिया वापस सेफली आ पाए।
हमारी इंडियन गवर्नमेंट ने बहुत अच्छी सुविधाएं दी। हमारे लिए फ्लाइट्स अवेलेबल थे, हमें एयरपोर्ट जाने का एकदम आराम से सुविधाएं मिली। खाने पीने कोई दिक्कत नहीं हुआ। अब बहुत अच्छे से हमारे बाकी सारे स्टूडेंट जो फंसे हुए थे वो कल भी लैंड कर गए हैं, कुछ आज लैंड कर गए हैं। थैंक यू मोदी सर। हम लोगों ने बहुत आराम से हम वहाँ से निकल गए हैं।
बॉर्डर क्रॉस करने के बाद इंडियन एम्बेसी ने हमें बहुत ही सुरक्षित तरीके से हमारे कंट्री में पहुंचाया। तो मैं हमारे प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी यानी कि आपका बहुत ही धन्यवाद कहना चाहूंगी कि आपने मुझे मेरे घर तक सुरक्षित पहुंचाया और मुझे विश्वास है कि और भी जो बच्चे फंसे हैं आप उन्हें भी जल्द से जल्द उनके घर पहुंचा देंगे।
The students were from Varanasi as well as other parts of Uttar Pradesh. Mr. Modi assured that the students that the government is committed to the safety of every Indian stranded in Ukraine. The Prime Minister said all efforts are on to bring back all the students safely.
इन सारी समस्याओं का समाधान उसी में है। उसी प्रकार से मैं तो अभी भी मानता हूं कि अगर देश में पहले से मेडिकल एजुकेशन की नीतियां सही होती तो आप लोगों को बाहर नहीं जाना पड़ता। कौन माँ बाप चाहते कि इस छोटी उम्र में अकेले भेजते? कोई माँ बाप नहीं चाहता। लेकिन अब लगे हैं। देखिए पहले करीब 300-400 के बीच में हमारे यहाँ मेडिकल कॉलेज थी। अब हम करीब 700 तक पहुंच गए हैं। हर जिले में मेडिकल कॉलेज कर रहे हैं। पहले हमारे देश में कोई 80-90 हजार के बीच में सीटें थी। अब पिछले 5 साल में हम इसको 1.5 लाख तक पहुंचा दिया है। यूपी में भी नए 2100 विद्यार्थियों के लिए सीटें बनाई हैं।
A special Indigo flight carrying 219 Indian nationals from Bucharest landed in Delhi during wee hours today. The Indian nationals were evacuated from Ukraine and brought to Romania, where they boarded the flight. Minister of State for Agriculture Kailash Chaudhary received them at the airport. Another flight from Budapest also landed early morning today with 219 Indian evacuees from Ukraine. Minister of State for Home Nishit Pramanik received them at the airport. 2 C-17 Globemaster of Indian Air Force carrying 210 Indian nationals each from Bucharest and Budapest landed at Hindon Air Base near Delhi this morning. Minister of State for Defence Ajay Bhatt received them. IAF said its C-17 Globemaster has operated 7 flights and brought home 1,428 Indian nationals so far. It has also delivered 9.7 tons of relief material. As part of Operation Ganga aimed at evacuating the stranded Indians in war-torn Ukraine, a special flight arrived early this morning in Mumbai from Romania carrying 185 passengers. Air India Express flight from Romania's capital Bucharest reached Mumbai's international airport carrying 185 passengers, mainly students. The passengers were received by Union Minister Rao Sahib Patil Danve. Indian Railways has set up a help desk at T2 terminal of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport in Mumbai to facilitate onward travel of passengers.
The Defence Ministry has issued an advisory for Indian nationals in Ukraine's Kharkiv and asked them to remain mentally strong and compiled and share information with fellow Indians. It asked Indian nationals to organize in small groups and squads of 10 Indian students and within that organize buddy or pair system. Their presence and whereabouts must always be known to their buddy or small group coordinator. The advisory asked Indian students to keep ready a small kit of essential items on person or at hand around the clock and keep a white flag or white cloth for waving. They must avoid stepping out from their bunkers, basements or shelter at all times. They should not go to downtown or crowded areas and join local protesters or militia.
Now the latest update from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Russian troops are gaining ground in southern Ukraine that threatens to cut off Ukraine's access to Black Sea. As more shellings were reported, graving the humanitarian crisis, Ukrainian President Zelensky has asked Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for one-to-one talks. Zelensky said that this is the only way to end the war. He also urged the Western countries to give him planes to fight the invasion. Zelensky also called upon NATO to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has alleged that Russian troops have surrounded the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant and are firing at it from all sides. The Zaporizhzhia plant is the largest nuclear plant in Europe. A fire has broken out at the nuclear power plant, reportedly due to the shelling. International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA said in a tweet that it is in contact with Ukrainian authorities over the situation at the plant. On the other hand, the United Kingdom has imposed sanctions on 2 more Russian oligarchs. The United States has also allowed Ukrainian refugees to stay in the country temporarily as part of humanitarian relief.
You're listening to the Morning News on All India Radio. A reminder of the headlines before we move on. Over 56% polling recorded in 6th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Second and final phase of assembly elections in Manipur to be held tomorrow. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Quad must remain focused on promoting peace, stability and prosperity in Indo-Pacific region. Also stresses on need for dialogue and diplomacy amid Russia-Ukraine conflict. Prime Minister interacts with students who have returned from Ukraine. Defence Ministry issues advisory for Indian nationals stranded in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Survival guidelines warn them of possible aerial raids, missile and grenade attacks. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address webinar on energy for sustainable growth today. 97% of adult population in the country inoculated with the first dose of COVID vaccine. And in cricket, first test match between India and Sri Lanka to begin today in Mohali. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
अपने बिजनेस को बढ़ाने के लिए लीजिए आकाशवाणी का सहयोग और दीजिए उसे बुलंदियों के पंख।
आपका बिजनेस लोकल है या राष्ट्रीय, आकाशवाणी देती है उपभोक्ताओं तक पहुंचने का हर विकल्प।
और अब तो आप घर, दफ्तर या दुकान पर बैठे बैठे कर सकते हैं आकाशवाणी के किसी भी केंद्र के लिए विज्ञापनों की बुकिंग।
आकाशवाणी के विभिन्न चैनलों पर विज्ञापन देना सुलभ और सस्ता।
बुकिंग है तो संपर्क करें 8700014242 पर।
8700014242।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address a webinar on energy for sustainable growth today. In order to facilitate efficient and speedy implementation of Union Budget 2022 announcements, the Government of India is holding a series of webinars across various key sectors. As part of this series, the sectoral group on resources comprising Ministries of Power, Petroleum and Natural Gas, New and Renewable Energy, Coal, Mines, External Affairs, and Environment, Forest and Climate Change is organizing a webinar on energy for sustainable growth at 10 a.m. this morning. Its objective is to discuss the initiatives of the Government of India in the energy and resources sector, which have been announced in Budget 2022, and to elicit ideas and suggestions for effective implementation of these initiatives. The themes identified for the webinar are developing energy storage for renewable energy expansion, lifestyle for environment, coal gasification, promoting biomass as an alternative energy source, agro and farm forestry, and scaling up of renewable energy. We spoke to Minister of State for Power, Krishan Pal Gurjar, about the webinar.
हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी बहुत ही विजनरी आदमी है। वो पहले से ही किसी भी समस्या के समाधान के लिए प्रोएक्टिव रहते हैं। प्रधानमंत्री जी के आने के बाद हम डेफिसिट के अलावा उसमें हम फालतू उत्पादन करने लगे और आज देश एक्सपोर्ट भी करता है दूसरे देशों को। और बिजली में इतने सुधार हुए हैं, हर स्टेट के लिए इतना पैसा हमारे पास दिया गया है केंद्र सरकार के बजट में कि पूरे देश में बिजली के सुधारीकरण के लिए बहुत तेजी से काम चल रहा है। आज का जो प्रधानमंत्री जी का जो संबोधन है, जो मार्गदर्शन है, वो हमारे लिए प्रेरणादायी होने वाला है कि हमको इलेक्ट्रिक वाहनों में किस तरह से तेजी से उनके उत्पादन बढ़ाना है, बिक्री बढ़ानी है। और पिछले दिनों में टू व्हीलर्स की बिक्री में बहुत बड़ा उछाल आया है। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि आज का जो मार्गदर्शन होगा वो हमारे लिए बड़ा प्रेरणादायी होगा।
Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia has said that 97% of the adult population has been inoculated with the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine. In a tweet, he said the nation is rapidly marching towards achieving 100% first dose mark. He said that with Sabka Prayas, the world's largest vaccination drive is going from strength to strength. India's COVID vaccination coverage has crossed the 178 crore 26 lakh mark. More than 21 lakh vaccine doses were administered yesterday. Over 2 crore precaution doses have been administered so far to the identified categories of beneficiaries, including healthcare workers, frontline workers, and people over 60 years.
And now let's listen to our special program, Azadi Ka Safar, highlighting the importance of the day during the freedom struggle.
Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News, Birth of a Nation.
India's glorious freedom struggle is one of the greatest struggles the modern world has ever witnessed. AIR News brings you a glimpse of the struggle every day. In our 200th episode today, we remember freedom fighter Ripudaman Singh, who was born on the 4th of March 1883. Son of Maharaja Hira Singh of Nabha, he was nominated as a member Imperial Legislative Council during 1906 to 1908. He was generally critical of the British and voted against the Seditious Meetings Bill. After the death of his father in December 1911, Ripudaman Singh returned to Nabha and ascended the throne in January 1912. As a king, Ripudaman Singh adopted an independent stance in his dealings with political officers and lieutenant governors. He appointed the Congressite Purushottam Das Tandon as chief minister and engaged a pro-Congress barrister, Sir Eardley Norton. He insisted on the treaty rights and autonomy of princes in the princes' conferences.
He overlooked the presence of Gadarites in his territories and donated money towards the founding of Banaras Hindu University. He presided over a session of the Tilak School of Politics and contributed to the Tilak Swaraj Fund. He gave financial support to pro-Congress papers like the Bombay Chronicle and the Indian Daily Herald and interacted with the national leaders like Gokhale, Malviya, Lajpat Rai and Motilal Nehru.
During the Akali movement in Punjab, Ripudaman Singh observed the Martyrs' Day to honour all those who laid down their lives at Nankana Sahib.
लखवार लखवीर करे देखिए दादी खातर जिन्ना हसास लखा कष्ट.
After a manipulated political inquiry, Ripudaman Singh was forced into dissociating himself from the Nabha administration and sent subsequently to Dehradun.
The issue of his restoration was taken up by the Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee and the Shiromani Akali Dal, which developed into a prolonged agitation during 1923 to 1925 called the Jaito Morcha. The Indian National Congress also passed resolutions in support of Ripudaman Singh.
After the enactment of Gurudwara legislation and withdrawal of Akali agitation in 1925, Ripudaman Singh was deposed formally in 1928 and sent to Kodaikanal in Madras Presidency as a political prisoner. Several national leaders tried to secure his release, but the government remained adamant on the plea of his disloyalty. Ripudaman Singh was all alone in Kodaikanal when he died in December 1942 after a long and persistent fight for freedom. We salute the
fighter Bulusu Sambamurthy, who was born on the 4th of March 1886 in Godavari district of the erstwhile Madras Presidency. He was inspired by a speech by Konda Venkatappaya Pantulu and gave up his law profession to join the non-cooperation movement in 1920.
Sambamurthy was a true Gandhian and adopted Gandhian principles in everyday life. In 1923, he became a member of the organizing committee of the Kakinada session of the Indian National Congress. He was one of the first leaders to demand Purna Swaraj.
In April 1930, he participated in a salt satyagraha at Chollangi near Kakinada and was arrested. He stood in the 1937 Madras Assembly elections and was elected the President of the Madras Legislative Council. He served from 1937 to 1942 when he resigned due to the outbreak of the Quit India movement.
Sambamurthy was also connected with the Andhrodhyamam, Andhra movement. When Potti Sri Ramulu decided to fast unto death at Madras in 1952 on the issue of formation of Andhra province, Sambamurthy placed his residence at his disposal. We salute the great patriot.
We also remember Indian National Army member Deep Singh. Born in Haryana, Deep Singh joined the INA voluntarily as a sepoy and served in the 3rd Guerrilla Regiment. He was killed while taking part in the fighting against the British in Burma on the 4th of March 1944. We salute the great martyr.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Azadi Ka Safar with AIR News. See you in the next episode tomorrow.
In the program Parikrama today, listen to the special roundup on patriotic films and songs which lifted the spirit of the Indian freedom movement. Azadi ke Tarane at 4:45 p.m.
स्वाधीनता आंदोलन के दौरान भारतीय जनमानस को उत्प्रेरित कर स्वतंत्रता का अलख जगाने और मातृभूमि के प्रति सेवा, समर्पण और त्याग की ज्वाला प्रज्वलित कर देने वाले अमर गीतों पर आधारित विशेष कार्यक्रम आजादी के तराने सुनना न भूलें। FM गोल्ड 100.1 मेगाहर्ट्ज पर प्रत्येक शुक्रवार शाम 4:45 पर परिक्रमा कार्यक्रम के अंतर्गत आजादी के तराने सिर्फ आकाशवाणी पर।
Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has called for increasing India's share in global trade to 10% and taking India's share of exports in GDP to about 25%. Addressing the closing session of the post-budget webinar on Make in India for the World, Mr. Goyal said these are ambitious targets but doable. He said other countries are also talking of programs very similar to Atmanirbhar Bharat.
In cricket, the first test of the two-match series between India and Sri Lanka will begin today in Mohali. The first test will mark the beginning of newly appointed full-time skipper Rohit Sharma's journey as the leader of the test side. Virat Kohli, on the other hand, will represent India in the cricketing whites for the 100th time. The home side has a few records to extend as it enters the test series. The 2022 edition of the ICC Women's World kicked off today with New Zealand women taking on West Indies women in the tournament opener at Bay Oval Stadium in Mount Maungani. A total of 8 teams are taking part in the competition. The 8 teams are India women, Pakistan women, Australia women, Bangladesh women, New Zealand women, South Africa women, England women and West Indies women. The tournament is being held in New Zealand. Indian women will begin their journey in the tournament on Sunday when they take on arch-rival Pakistan. England is the defending champion of the tournament. England defeated India in the previous edition of the ICC Women's World Cup in 2017. The Women's World Cup was originally scheduled to take place last year but was postponed due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. ICC Women's World Cup 2022 is being played in a round-robin format. All 8 teams will face each other once during the tournament. The top 4 teams in the points table after the league stage will lock horns in the semi-final.
Now let us take a look at the weather forecast for today. The national capital Delhi is likely to have strong surface winds during daytime. The temperature will vary between 13 and 28 degrees Celsius. Mumbai will have a mainly clear sky. The minimum temperature was 22 degrees Celsius, while the maximum is expected to be around 36 degrees. Chennai is likely to have generally cloudy sky with light rain. The temperature will vary between 23 and 31 degrees Celsius. Kolkata will have a partly cloudy sky. The minimum temperature was 20 degrees Celsius and a maximum will be of around 31 degrees. Srinagar will have a partly cloudy sky, becoming generally cloudy towards afternoon or evening. The temperature will hover between 4 and 12 degrees Celsius. Jammu will have a mainly clear sky. The minimum temperature was 12 degrees Celsius, while the maximum will be around 22 degrees. Leh is likely to have a partly cloudy sky. The minimum and maximum temperature will hover between -6 and 5 degrees Celsius. Gilgit will have a partly cloudy sky. The temperature will hover between 6 and 16 degrees Celsius. And Muzaffarabad will have a mainly clear sky. The minimum temperature was 6 degrees and maximum will be around 22. Guwahati will have a partly cloudy sky with haze. Temperature will hover between 15 and 30.
And now an overview of today's newspapers. The Russia-Ukraine crisis continues to figure prominently on the front pages of newspapers. India pushes for dialogue as Quad takes up Ukraine war, writes the Hindustan Times. The Pioneer says Operation Ganga is at full throttle. 3.7K come home as Ukraine-Russia begins second round of talks. UP voter turnout this time matching figures of 2017 polls, says the Hindu. Ganguly oversteps creeds and rules to sit in selection meetings, reports the Indian Express. The Statesman, quoting the Health Ministry, says only 0.7% of global COVID-19 cases reported in India. Unvaxxed accounted for 92% deaths, says the Times of India. Make in India more crucial from prism of national security, Prime Minister headlines the Business Standard. And finally, Amazon, Biani, Reliance to try and settle future dispute, reads a headline in the Times of India.
And now before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Over 56% polling recorded in 6th phase of assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh. Second and final phase of assembly elections in Manipur to be held tomorrow. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Quad must remain focused on promoting peace, stability and prosperity in Indo-Pacific region. Also stresses on need for dialogue and diplomacy amid Russia-Ukraine conflict. Prime Minister interacts with students who have returned from Ukraine. Defense Ministry issues advisory for Indian nationals stranded in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Survival guidelines warn them of possible aerial raids, missile and grenade attacks. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address webinar on energy for sustainable growth today. 97% of adult population in the country inoculated with first dose of COVID vaccine. And in cricket, first test match between India and Sri Lanka to begin today in Mohali. And with that, we end the morning news. Have a nice day.